No, those aren't banjos playing down the river. But if you're looking for something a bit creepy to watch, you might want to check out a supernatural/spiritual horror on Netflix that's called Deliverance. It's centered around family, and more distressingly, it's inspired by true events. Ebony Jackson is a struggling single mother fighting her personal demons. She moves her family into a new home for a fresh start, but when strange occurrences inside the home raise the suspicions of Child Protective Services and threaten to tear the family apart, Ebony soon finds herself locked in a battle for her life and the souls of her children. So yeah, for all the skeptics out there, myself included, after watching this, you might want to check out an article that's published by the Indianapolis Star. I'll link the article in the description, and it details out some very unnerving information that's also captured within this horror. Now, this is directed by Lee Daniels, who brought us other hits like Precious, The Butler, and The United States vs. Billie Holiday. Now, in The Deliverance, there's a huge focus on the theme of family, but Daniels doesn't hide the dysfunction and the issues that the Jackson family faces within the story. Andra expertly plays Ebony, an alcoholic single mother who's got a pretty raw and angry dynamic with her 3 kids. And the story takes its time in establishing the mood and spirit in which the family functions. They struggle financially, but also aren't kind to each other, especially in the interactions between Ebony and her kids, and then Ebony and her mom, who's played by Glenn Close. The first quarter to a third of the film works to set the stage for how angry, sad, and beaten down the Jacksons are emotionally, making them a perfect target for some malevolent supernatural force. But well before any of that kicks in, we get to know the family and their house, so that the environment it's solidified as an additional character within the narrative. We can see how portions are decrepit, despite Ebony and her kids working to fix it up and decorate it so that the dwelling becomes more of a home rather than just this structure. We also are shown how small and then strange occurrences begin to happen. Sometimes it's just a door swinging open, maybe a creak of a floorboard. But there's also the congregation of flies that adds an unclean vibe. And it's not unnoticed by the family too, which also then enhances the creepiness because they're aware that something is off just as we do. Now, this presentation delves heavily into spirituality, which I think could be a turnoff for some, especially as the film nears the climax and finale. The inclusion, it makes sense, especially thanks to established development earlier in the story. But the transition that we witness within Ebony, it's going to take some suspension of disbelief just simply due to the speed in which she makes heart changes. Now, from a story progression, this is a longer one than you might expect. It's not unnecessarily lengthy, but it's closer to the 2-hour mark rather than the 9 minutes that many other horrors tend to stick to. Now, for me, this length works because it means we had so much more development and setup before anything really crazy kicks into gear. Andra knocks it out of the park in this. She's riding the line between despicable and sympathetic. Ebony's most certainly a flawed character, but not one that's devoid of redemption. We watch her continuously make poor choices, even knowing that she is harming the relationship with her kids and risking their future together. But then she also fights fiercely for them, creating a sort of hypocrisy and duplicity to her persona. I wanted her to succeed, but at the same time, I wanted her to snap out of her selfish behaviors and focus on doing what was best for the kids. Glenn Close is also awesome in this. She resembles her role in Hillbilly Elegy, but with better clothes and a manicure. She's gruff, also pretty unlikable in many instances, but she has this warmth and care to her that's hidden. And in Close's masterful delivery, we can see those glimpses of humanity, even when it's wrapped in profanity-laden insults. But for as wonderful as both of those performances are, young actor Anthony B. Jenkins, who plays the youngest son Andra, he absolutely chews through his scenes in a very frightening and troublesome manner. There are moments early in the film where he quietly and innocently will be having a conversation. The subtle looks he gives, sometimes sheepishly, other times just purely naive, it creates chills. And then when the film is in full horror mode, the snarls and eye movements that he creates, it's going to make you squirm, maybe even pee a tiny bit. There are so many times when the kid has to showcase a detached and absent vibe, but not one that's harmless. Instead, when the vacant look comes about, it needs to be terrifying. And then Jenkins nails it. And since I am talking about the horrific portion of the storytelling, when this reaches the point where it focuses on the terror, the pace increases dramatically and then takes on a frenzied energy. The story still isn't being rushed necessarily, just an urgency takes hold and it got my adrenaline pumping. There are moments in this too when some very clever transitions are used, showing us how a character looks and then seamlessly giving us a new and even more demented vision. Now, not only did these look great, but they weren't a one-off. Daniel uses this technique a few times towards the finale so that it maximizes the emotional pull and devastation. But also, within the climax of the film, there are a few times when some of the visuals and graphics, they broke me out of the illusion. I mean, some look just a bit too fake. Most of what we see is done practically, with excellent makeup and camera movements. But when the element needed to be completed digitally, or at least enhanced, the effects, they weren't as polished and effective. Now, this isn't a large deal, especially because so much of what we watch is realistic looking, but it is noticeable. Now, I think maybe the largest hurdle anybody is going to have to get over is the crux of the story. I mean, the basis for why this is even happening to the Jackson family to begin with. We get some explanation for what transpired before them, but the true reasoning for why it isn't truly explored. Meaning you just have to accept that this nasty presence chose this specific spot to take hold, and then the family is unfortunately there to be affected. Now, despite any subpar effects or some missing foundational lore, the Deliverance executes unnerving tension and chills, while also capturing a heartbreaking family dynamic wrapped in strife and struggle. Andra expertly crafts a character with warring dualities, each resonating truth, even if it's despicable. With a story basis rooted in true events, director Daniels melds spirituality with the supernatural, showcasing the potential power of each in a struggle for domination. And the film wouldn't have nearly the punch it does without the phenomenal performance from Anthony B. Jenkins, who captivates with distressing and frightening expressions that result in an eerie presentation. There's no sex or nudity, but a ton of profanity and then a lot of violence, including violence to children. I give The Deliverance 4 out of 5 couches. So what's on your radar to watch this week? Anything that you can recommend to me in the comments below? If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.